What does Armageddon really mean, and why does it arouse so much fascination and fear to this day? To understand the depth of this concept, we need to delve into the biblical scriptures, exploring not only its historical context, but also the numerous theological and cultural interpretations it has generated over the centuries. The term Armageddon appears in Revelation 16:16, and he gathered them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Nadi, despite being a brief reference, this passage has become one of the most intriguing and debated pillars of all apocalyptic literature. The word Armageddon derives from the Hebrew Har Megiddo, which means Mount Megiddo, a site situated in northern Israel, known for its strategic and historical importance. But what makes Megiddo so special, and why was it chosen as a symbol of a final cataclysmic battle? Megiddo, contrary to what its name suggests, is not a mountain, but a hill that has served as the scene of numerous battles throughout history. Its strategic location, connecting trade and military routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia, has turned it into a point of constant dispute. This historical context seems to have influenced the choice of the location as a metaphor for an ultimate confrontation between opposing forces. However, is this battle described in Revelation a literal event or a symbolic representation of a spiritual clash that transcends the physical world? The literal interpretation of Armageddon is widely held by certain Christian groups, especially premillennialists, who view the event as a last physical battle between earthly armies. This view is based on the belief that in the last days, the nations of the world will be gathered under the influence of evil powers for direct confrontation against God. However, other scholars argue that Armageddon is a metaphor rich in symbolism, representing humanity's internal struggle against sin, chaos, and wickedness. If we consider Revelation as a text loaded with symbolism, Armageddon could be interpreted as an allegory for the spiritual battle waged in the hearts and minds of the people. This confrontation does not take place on physical battlefields, but rather in the deepest realms of human existence, where virtue faces vice and hope defies despair. This perspective is reinforced by other biblical passages that describe the conflict between good and evil as an ongoing struggle rather than as an isolated event in the future. It is important to note that the symbolism of Armageddon also reflects the social and political tensions of the period in which Revelation was written. During the 1st century AD, Christians faced intense persecution under the Roman Empire. The author of Revelation, identified as John, used vivid and powerful imagery to convey messages of hope and resistance. In this context, Armageddon can be seen as a representation of the confrontation between imperial oppression and the Christian faith, with the promise that in the end, good will triumph over evil. The connection between Megiddo and Armageddon also raises interesting questions about the interpretation of Scripture. At Megiddo, several historical battles determined the fate of kingdoms and nations. For example, in 609 BC, King Josiah of Judah was killed in a battle against Pharaoh Necho II of Egypt at this location. This event left a deep mark on the collective memory of the Jewish people, turning Megiddo into a symbol of loss and renewal. By associating Armageddon with this location, the author of Revelation may have evoked these memories to emphasize the gravity and importance of the final confrontation. But what really makes Armageddon so impactful is its ability to transcend time and space, resonating in diverse cultural and spiritual contexts. For many, it represents the culmination of all human struggles, a last chance at redemption before the advent of a new era. Whether as a literal battle or as a metaphor, Armageddon challenges readers to reflect on their own internal battles and to seek deeper meaning in their lives. At the heart of this reflection is the question of divine justice. Revelation portrays Armageddon not just as an event of destruction, but as a time of judgment and restoration. This perspective offers hope to those who suffer and inspires faith in a future where evil will be defeated and peace will prevail. This element of hope is crucial to understanding the lasting impact of Armageddon, both as a theological concept and as a source of cultural inspiration. On the other hand, the literal interpretation of Armageddon continues to capture the imagination of millions of people, especially in a world marked by conflict and uncertainty. Wars, environmental crises, and pandemics are often seen as signs that the final battle is approaching. This perspective is fueled not only by religious interpretations, but also by popular narratives that explore the theme of the apocalypse in movies, books, and television shows. Armageddon, in this sense, is both a mirror of our contemporary concerns and an expression of our search for meaning in times of crisis. The exploration of Armageddon in modern contexts also raises questions about the role of religion in today's society. For some, it is a call to spiritual preparation and renewal of faith. For others, it is a grim reminder of the consequences of our collective choices, from armed conflict to environmental degradation. In any case, Armageddon continues to be a concept that transcends religious, cultural, and social boundaries, provoking profound reflections on the fate of humanity and the impact of the decisions we make today. Whether through a spiritual or pragmatic lens, it stands as a powerful symbol of renewal and a wake-up call on the need for balance and accountability to ensure a more hopeful future. If you're enjoying this analysis on the profound significance of Armageddon and how it continues to influence our worldview, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to follow more content like this and activate the bell so you don't miss our updates. Your participation is essential for us to expand this discussion. Did you know that the concept of Armageddon goes beyond the Bible and influences many other religions and cultures around the world? This concept of a final battle between good and evil has its roots in Christianity, but it is also present in Judaism, Islam, and many other traditions. Is Armageddon just an apocalyptic event, or is there something deeper behind this universal symbolism? Let's explore these fascinating interpretations and understand how they have shaped the view of the end times in different parts of the world. In Judaism, the concept of a cosmic battle at the end times is equally important, although the term Armageddon itself is not used. Jews believe that the Messiah, an anointed leader, will be responsible for defeating the forces of evil and establishing the kingdom of God. This idea is reflected in apocalyptic texts such as the Book of Daniel, which describes the final victory of the people of Israel against their enemies. The struggle between the forces of God and the forces of evil, while not identifying an Armageddon specifically, has the same symbolic and theological meaning: the search for salvation and lasting peace after a great tribulation. In Islam, the belief in the final battle is equally strong, with the event known as Malhama al-Kubra. This apocalyptic war, according to Islamic traditions, will take place before the Day of Judgment and will involve a major confrontation between the forces of God and the forces of darkness. In this battle, Imam Mahdi, a Muslim messianic figure, and Jesus, Isa, will lead the righteous against the enemies of the faith. The Malhama al-Kubra is a spiritual struggle, but also a literal one, with the final victory being the defeat of the evil forces and the establishment of an era of peace and justice, where the true faith will be victorious. In several other cultures and religious traditions, the idea of a great final confrontation between good and evil is a recurring theme. Popular culture, for example, has embraced the concept of Armageddon in a literal and often apocalyptic way, with movies, books, and series depicting the end of the world through catastrophic events such as alien invasions, nuclear wars, and natural disasters. These scenarios are often used to reflect the collective fear of the future, anxiety about the direction of humanity, and the constant struggle between forces of destruction and the search for a new world order. But Armageddon, as a concept, also represents something deeper. On a symbolic level, it is a metaphor for the internal battles we face in our lives. This struggle need not only be between nations or religions, but also in our own hearts and minds, where good and evil constantly confront each other. Throughout history, Armageddon has been interpreted as a reflection of the struggle for morality, justice, and truth. The transition between chaos and order, light and darkness, life and death are all elements that characterize this great clash. And that's why, even in such a secularized world, the concept of Armageddon continues to resonate with many people. It symbolizes the eternal struggle that everyone faces, collectively or individually, to overcome life's challenges and find redemption. It is not just a prediction of a future event, but a representation of the difficulties and choices we face each day. Our understanding of Armageddon, therefore, goes beyond a simple physical battle or an apocalyptic event. It is a mirror of the human condition, of the spiritual, emotional, and psychological struggles we all face. As modern society continues to evolve, the symbolism of Armageddon also adapts, becoming a tool for reflecting on our own internal battles, as well as the external conflicts that shape our history. This interpretation transcends the boundaries of religions and cultures, uniting different visions of the end times in a universal search for truth, justice, and peace. Armageddon, whether seen as a literal battle or a spiritual metaphor, continues to be a powerful idea that challenges us to reflect on our role in the world and our collective destiny. Did you know that Armageddon is not just a physical battle, but a powerful symbolism present in Revelation, filled with metaphors that reflect the internal struggle between good and evil? How can we understand the central message of this final battle and what it really represents for humanity? Let's delve into the deep symbolism of Armageddon in Revelation and discover how it can be interpreted not only as a future event, but as a reflection of each individual's spiritual journey. The book of Revelation, in its full context, is one of the most complex and symbolic texts in the Bible, and Armageddon is no exception. When we think of the word Armageddon, many immediately imagine a great war, an epic battle between good and evil. But the biblical text does not give us specific details about how this battle will take place, who will fight it, or how it will outcome. Instead, Revelation uses rich symbolism to convey to us a profound message about the end times. The place called Armageddon is mentioned in Revelation 16:16. But what it actually represents is a topic that has been widely debated among theologians, scholars, and believers over the centuries. One of the most popular interpretations of Armageddon is to see it as a great physical battle, where the forces of good, represented by Christ and his followers, face the forces of evil, led by the beast and the false prophet. In this sense, the battle is a representation of the final confrontation between the spiritual forces at work in the world. The beast and the false prophet are central figures of Revelation, representing the forces of evil, while the Lamb, who is a representation of Jesus Christ, is the leader of the forces of good. This confrontation between the forces of good and evil is the climax of the apocalyptic narrative, a decisive moment where final victory will be achieved. However, the metaphor behind this battle runs even deeper. Rather than simply focusing on the literal battle, we can understand Armageddon as a representation of the spiritual struggle taking place within each of us. The battle between good and evil, represented by Christ and the beast, is also a metaphor for the internal conflict we face in daily life, where our own choices, actions, and beliefs are tested. The apocalypse then presents us with a symbolic vision of an inner process of purification and redemption, where the forces of light and darkness compete for control of our souls. The idea that Armageddon is actually a spiritual battle is reflected in the very structure of the book of Revelation, which is filled with images of duality, light versus darkness, life versus death, good versus evil. The final battle is not just a matter of external forces, but a reflection on the internal forces acting on us and the choices we make. The book challenges us to confront our own shadows and fight against the sin and wickedness within us, as a preparation for the ultimate victory of good. This interpretation transforms Armageddon from an apocalyptic prediction to an ongoing process of personal transformation. Another interesting aspect of the symbolism of Armageddon is the role that the heavenly city, New Jerusalem, plays in the narrative. After the final battle, Revelation describes the descent of the New Jerusalem, a new heaven and a new earth, where God's presence will be permanent and where there will be no more pain, suffering, or death. This suggests that Armageddon, while symbolically a struggle between good and evil, is also directly linked to the idea of redemption and restoration. Revelation, then, is not just about the end of the world, but about the beginning of a new era where justice and peace will prevail. This concept of new age is not limited to Revelation, but aligns with a broader tradition within biblical scripture. The idea of a new beginning, where the forces of evil are defeated and divine truth is finally revealed, is present in many biblical passages. Armageddon, in this sense, serves as the turning point for this new reality, where the cycle of suffering and sin comes to an end and is replaced by a new creation in harmony with the divine will. However, the interpretation of Armageddon as a spiritual infighting does not mean that the final battle will be a purely symbolic event. Many Christian traditions believe that Armageddon will be a literal event, a physical confrontation between the armies of good and evil, where Christ will return to defeat God's enemies. Premillennialists, for example, interpret Armageddon as a future, physical event that will occur during the Great Tribulation period, a time of global suffering before Christ's return. In this scenario, the forces of evil are defeated in a final battle, and Christ will establish a reign of peace. Whether understood as a physical or symbolic event, Armageddon represents the ultimate victory of good over evil, but the significance of this victory varies depending on one's theological perspective. For Christians, this victory is the promise that evil will be eradicated and God's justice will finally be established throughout the earth. The Battle of Armageddon, then, is more than just a war. It is the fulfillment of God's promise of redemption and restoration of creation. It is important to note that within the context of Revelation, Armageddon is also related to the concept of doomsday. The end of the world, as described in Revelation, is not only a destruction, but also a judgment of all human beings. The final battle will be followed by the judgment of the nations, where each person will be judged according to their actions. Those who have opposed God and lived in sin will be condemned, while the righteous will be rewarded with eternal life. This judgment, which is part of the drama of Armageddon, is one of the most fearful and at the same time most uplifting aspects of the apocalyptic message. The tension between judgment and redemption is what gives Armageddon its symbolic depth. The end of the world is not only an event of destruction, but a process of separation between the righteous and the wicked, between those who have chosen to live in harmony with the divine will and those who have rejected this call. Revelation, with its vision of a final judgment, reminds us of the importance of our choices and actions, of how they shape our destiny and the fate of the world. Finally, the interpretation of Armageddon in Revelation is rich and multifaceted. For some, it is a literal physical battle that will mark the end times and the triumphant return of Christ. For others, it is a metaphor for the internal struggle against evil and sin, which each person must face on their spiritual journey. Revelation offers us both of these possibilities, allowing us to see Armageddon not only as a future event, but also as a reflection of our own constant struggle between the forces of good and evil, between light and darkness. The central message of Armageddon, regardless of how we interpret it, is clear: good will triumph over evil. In the end, the victory will be God's, and all those who persevere in faith and righteousness will be rewarded with eternal peace. Armageddon, therefore, is both a warning and a promise, challenging us to live according to divine principles as we await the day of final redemption. If this reflection on the symbolism of Armageddon has touched you in any way, be sure to share this video with those who are also seeking to understand the profound message behind Revelation. Subscribe to our channel for more content that explores spiritual and biblical issues in an in-depth and accessible way. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next videos, and keep following this journey of learning and reflection. Also, leave your comment below. How do you interpret Armageddon? Have you ever wondered if Armageddon will be a literal or symbolic event? How do theologians and scholars interpret this prophecy so differently? In this section, we will explore the diverse perspectives on Armageddon, debating the theological and scholarly views that have shaped our understanding of this apocalyptic prophecy. Get ready for a deep analysis that will challenge how you view the end times. The theological debate over Armageddon has been a central theme among scholars and religious leaders over the centuries. The question of whether Armageddon is to be understood literally or symbolically is one of the most discussed. Each interpretation offers a different view on how we should understand the end times and what is the role of the human being in this great prophetic event. On the one hand, we have the premillennialists, who believe that Armageddon will be a literal, physical event that occurred during the period of the Great Tribulation before the return of Christ. They see the final battle as the actual confrontation between the forces of good and evil, an apocalyptic war that will mark the end of time and give way to the establishment of the kingdom of God. On the other hand, amillennialists have a different view. They argue that Armageddon should not be understood as a physical event, but as a metaphor for the constant struggle between good and evil throughout human history. For amillennialists, the final battle is symbolic, representing the spiritual and moral struggles we all face on our personal journey. They believe that Armageddon is already happening in a spiritual sense, and that the final victory of good over evil will be achieved with the return of Christ, when divine justice will be fully established. The key to this interpretation is to understand Revelation as a book that does not describe specific future events, but rather as a portrayal of the spiritual battles that take place in the lives of all Christians. These two perspectives, the literal and the symbolic, illustrate the profound impact that Armageddon has on Christian doctrines and on theology as a whole. The battle between good and evil, the fight against sin, and the victory of the Lamb are recurring themes that not only speak to the future, but also have practical implications for the daily lives of believers. Armageddon, then, becomes a symbol of the spiritual struggle that takes place at all times, and its ultimate victory is not only over external forces, but also over the inner transformation of the human being. Christian theology is not the only area debating the meaning of Armageddon. Secular academics have also focused on this issue, approaching the topic from a historical and sociological perspective. For many scholars of history, Armageddon can be seen as a way for the author of Revelation to express the tensions and conflicts of his time. In the 1st century, Christians faced increasing persecution under the Roman Empire, and the book of Revelation may have been written as a response to resistance, offering a vision of hope and victory for believers suffering at the hands of an oppressive empire. From this historical perspective, Armageddon can be interpreted as an image of the conflict between the Roman Empire and the Christian faith, where the forces of evil are represented by the Roman Empire and its rulers, while the forces of good are represented by faithful Christians. The author of Revelation, John, would have used symbolic language to encourage Christians to persevere in faith, believing that although they would face great tribulation, in the end, the victory would be theirs, as God would finally triumph over the forces of evil. Furthermore, other scholars point out that Armageddon can be seen as part of a broader literary tradition of apocalypses and eschatological literature, which includes not only Revelation but also other biblical texts, such as the Book of Daniel, and non-canonical writings, such as the Book of Enoch. These texts, with their imagery of judgment and redemption, have in common a desire to communicate a vision of hope in times of suffering, offering comfort to the oppressed and warning those living in sin. Within this tradition, Armageddon is not only a battle at the end of the age, but also a reflection of the struggles that humanity constantly faces. The question of the historical interpretation of Armageddon also takes into account the political and social context of the time when Revelation was written. In times of great tribulation, as was the case with the persecution of Christians under Nero, the prophecy of a final grand event where God would bring justice and vengeance upon the wicked would have served as a powerful incentive for Christians to endure suffering with patience and faith. Armageddon, then, becomes a metaphor for the transformative power of faith in times of adversity, showing that even in the face of oppression, the victory of good is certain. However, it is important to note that while many scholars approach Armageddon from a historical or symbolic perspective, there are still those who believe that the prophecy of Armageddon will be fulfilled verbatim in a future event. Premillennialists in particular hold to the idea that Armageddon will be a real battle that will take place in the future during the period of the Great Tribulation. For them, Armageddon is the last great conflict before Christ's return and the establishment of his eternal reign. The battle will be fought between the forces of God, led by Christ, and the forces of evil, led by the beast and the false prophet. Armageddon will thus be a cataclysmic and physical event, which will mark the final defeat of evil and the restoration of the kingdom of God. While these two perspectives, the symbolic and the literal, seem contradictory at first glance, they can also be seen as complementary. The spiritual struggle against evil, represented by Armageddon, can be both an internal battle and a reflection of a final event in the future. The victory of good over evil, whether internal or external, is what gives meaning to the concept of Armageddon. Revelation, with its rich symbolism and powerful imagery, invites us to reflect on our own spiritual struggle, our choices and our actions, and how they align with God's will. Finally, the theological and scholarly debate over Armageddon not only helps us better understand the book of Revelation, but also challenges us to reflect on our role in the great spiritual drama unfolding in the world. Armageddon, whether literal or symbolic, teaches us that the struggle between good and evil is a constant reality, and that every choice we make can contribute to the ultimate victory of good. Armageddon, then, is not just an event of the future, but a reminder of the transformative power of faith and the need to persevere in our fight against the forces of evil. Have you ever paused to reflect on how the concept of Armageddon applies to the modern world? Can wars, climate change, and global tensions be seen as signs that the final battle is approaching? In this block, we will explore how Armageddon has been reinterpreted in the contemporary context, relating current events to ancient prophecy and discussing the implications of an end times in an increasingly globalized and interconnected world. Over the centuries, the concept of Armageddon has been reinterpreted according to the events and challenges faced by societies at different times. In ancient times, when the Bible was written, external threats were posed by oppressive empires, such as the Roman Empire and physical battles, were seen as the greatest expressions of evil. However, in the modern world, with the advancement of technology and globalization, the vision of Armageddon has expanded to encompass new types of catastrophes and confrontations. What was once understood as a physical battle can now be seen as a metaphor for the struggle against the great crises of our time. One of the biggest factors contributing to this new interpretation of Armageddon is the growing fear of a global collapse due to climate change, pandemics, and the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Many believe that the world is on the brink of a catastrophic crisis, and with that, the concept of Armageddon has been associated with the possibility of global destruction. For example, discussions of climate change, with the increasing frequency of natural disasters, droughts, floods, and extreme temperatures, can be seen as a reflection of the prophetic warnings of doom that precede the end times. Modern apocalypses, such as descriptions of a devastated and resourceless earth, seem to align with some of the most powerful images of Revelation, where nature rebels against humanity. The COVID-19 pandemic has also brought a new layer of interpretation to the concept of Armageddon. For many, the rapid spread of a deadly disease was seen as an expression of the prophecies about plagues and disasters that precede the end times. The feeling of global vulnerability and uncertainty about the future reflected for some an approach to Armageddon. This event brought to light questions about humanity's fragility in the face of unforeseen threats. And in this context, the concept of Armageddon appears as a reminder of human powerlessness in the face of external forces that are beyond our control. Another significant factor that has shaped the modern interpretation of Armageddon is the advancement of technologies of mass destruction, such as nuclear weapons. The risk of nuclear war, with the potential to decimate large populations and permanently alter the planet's ecology, has been a central concern since the Cold War. For many, the existence of these weapons of mass destruction is directly linked to the concept of Armageddon, as a nuclear war would be a form of global cataclysm that would correspond to biblical prophecies of an apocalyptic event. The destruction of entire cities by nuclear bombs, the radiation that could make them uninhabitable, and the long-term effects on life on the planet are all aspects that echo in the images of total destruction found in Revelation. In addition, growing geopolitical tension, such as disputes in the Middle East, especially involving Israel, and tensions with nuclear powers such as Russia and China, have been pointed out by some religious figures and scholars as signs that Armageddon is approaching. The founding of the State of Israel in 1948, for example, is seen by many as the fulfillment of biblical prophecies leading up to Armageddon. The final battle, in the view of some, will take place in the Valley of Megiddo in Israel, which is the place traditionally associated with the apocalyptic battle. The link between Armageddon and current political events has fueled the perception that the world is heading toward a major confrontation between the forces of good and evil, with Israel being the center of many of the events that will mark the end times. However, while many interpret global events as signs that Armageddon is coming, others prefer to take a more symbolic and philosophical view. For these people, Armageddon is not something that will occur physically, but rather a representation of the internal and spiritual battles that each individual faces throughout their life. The real struggle for many is not in great wars or global catastrophes, but in personal choices and in facing temptations and sin. In this context, Armageddon is an event that occurs within each person, a constant confrontation between good and evil, between truth and lies, between light and darkness. The metaphor of Armageddon as a spiritual battle is especially relevant in a modern world increasingly marked by individualism and the search for meaning. In times of uncertainty and hopelessness, many feel that they are living out their own version of Armageddon, facing emotional, existential, and spiritual crises. The battle, therefore, is internal and takes place in our hearts and minds. The final victory over evil, according to this perspective, does not depend on a global event, but on an inner transformation, where the person aligns himself with divine principles and overcomes his own failures. The search for spiritual answers has also intensified with the growing sense of insecurity in the modern world. Current generations, especially the younger ones, are increasingly looking for answers to the big questions of life and death, often through spiritual or philosophical beliefs that try to explain the meaning of existence and humanity's role in the universe. For many, Armageddon serves as a symbol of the great existential questions. What is the purpose of life? What will happen to humanity in the future? Is there a struggle between good and evil that defines the fate of the world? These issues are explored not only in religious traditions, but also in the sciences, philosophy, and popular culture. In many cases, Armageddon is depicted in pop culture as an imminent event that will involve a struggle between cosmic forces, a battle that transcends everyday concerns and reaches an epic scale. Movies, books, and TV series often explore the idea of a global apocalypse, where humanity is confronted with an existential threat that could destroy it. The way these depictions of the final battle resonate with audiences reveals a constant concern for the future, for the fate of civilization, and for the need to find meaning and purpose in the midst of chaos. Finally, Armageddon in the modern context serves as a powerful reminder that humanity faces significant challenges, both internal and external. Whether in the field of global politics, climate change, pandemics, or geopolitical tensions, the feeling that the world is on the brink of a major crisis is palpable. However, the concept of Armageddon also challenges us to reflect on how we are dealing with these challenges, both on a collective level and on a personal level. How are we preparing to face the end times, whether literal or symbolic? What can we learn from history and prophecy, and how can we apply these lessons to create a better and more just future for all? As the world continues to change and face new crises, the concept of Armageddon remains relevant. It reminds us of the importance of being aware of our own behaviors and actions, both personally and collectively, and how these factors can contribute to a future of peace or destruction. Armageddon, therefore, serves as a point of reflection, inviting us to face the crises that arise in our lives and to seek truth, justice, and renewal, regardless of what the future holds. Have you ever stopped to think about how the concept of Armageddon applies to the deepest issues of our existence? In an increasingly troubled world, can Armageddon, whether literal or symbolic, still teach us something about our inner struggle and our collective future? In this final block, we will reflect on the meaning of Armageddon, its relevance to current generations, and how its messages can inspire us to deal with contemporary challenges. Armageddon, whether seen as an apocalyptic event, a spiritual metaphor, or a symbolic reference to an internal battle, has a powerful message that transcends time and cultures. Its interpretation, as we have seen throughout the previous blocks, depends on a number of factors, such as religious beliefs, the historical context, and the social issues faced by different generations. However, one thing is certain: Armageddon has always been and will continue to be at the center of human reflections on the fate of humanity and the meaning of life. For many, Armageddon symbolizes the end of a cycle. This can be interpreted in many ways: the end of an era of oppression and suffering, the end of an era of sin and wickedness, or the end of humanity as we know it. However, unlike a vision of total end and desolation, the concept of Armageddon can also be seen as a new beginning. The idea of a new world, a spiritual renewal or a purification of humanity, is a recurring theme in religious traditions, especially Christianity. For Christians, Armageddon is more than an end. It is the beginning of an eternal reign of peace and justice. This type of vision offers hope and solace, even in the face of destruction and chaos. On a more personal level, Armageddon challenges us to reflect on the internal battles that we all face in our lives. Each of us is constantly battling forces that try to divert us from the path of morality, justice, and love. Sin, temptations, fear, and doubt are often the most destructive forces we encounter, and just as Armageddon is seen as the final struggle between good and evil, so each individual's life is marked by this constant battle. In this sense, Armageddon can be interpreted as the final struggle for the soul, the search for truth, and the need to make decisions that shape our character and our destiny. This is one of the most profound lessons we can draw from this prophecy: the need to fight against the forces that seek to destroy us inside and outside of ourselves. In a world where global tensions seem to be increasing, and where environmental, political, and social challenges constantly pressure us, the concept of Armageddon also invites us to collective reflection. What can we learn from the lessons of the past, and how can those lessons guide us to a better future? We live in an era where threats to our survival are more present than ever, whether through natural catastrophes such as global warming and climate change, or man-made threats such as the risk of nuclear war. In this context, Armageddon can be seen as a reminder that humanity is at a crossroads, with the future in our hands. The choice between destruction and renewal is ours, and it depends on the decisions we make today. Despite varying interpretations, Armageddon can also be seen as a call to action. The end of times does not need to be seen only as an inevitable sentence, but as an invitation to reflect on our actions and choices. The concept of Armageddon challenges us to be more aware of the consequences of our attitudes, both on a personal and collective level. How are we treating our planet? Are we respecting human rights? Are we building a more just and supportive society, or are we moving away from the fundamental principles of morality and ethics? Armageddon, therefore, can be seen as a metaphor for the moment of decision facing humanity. However, rather than seeing Armageddon merely as a prophecy of destruction, we can seek to understand this idea as an invitation to renewal. The biblical prophecy that evil will be defeated and that good will triumph in the end can be understood as a symbol of hope. The struggle between good and evil ultimately reflects the inner battle that each of us fights every day. And if the final victory is reserved for good, it offers us a message of faith, courage, and perseverance. No matter how difficult the times, no matter how deep our struggles, there is always the possibility of overcoming and redemption. Reflection on Armageddon leads us to consider our role in the world and how our actions can influence the future. On a global stage, the choices we make as individuals, as communities, and as nations have a direct impact on the world around us. Armageddon can be interpreted as a point of reflection on the paths we choose to follow. Are we promoting peace or fueling conflict? Are we taking care of our planet and our natural resources, or are we accelerating its destruction? Armageddon, in this sense, can serve as a mirror that reflects the consequences of our actions, inviting us to rethink our future and adopt more responsible and conscious behaviors. For younger generations, Armageddon can be an opportunity to think about how to build a brighter future. Instead of fearing the end times, we can focus on how we can contribute to the creation of a better world. By adopting a mindset of renewal and transformation, we can each become agents of change. Armageddon does not have to be a threat, but rather a challenge to be better, more compassionate, and more aware of our impact on the world. Finally, Armageddon reminds us of the importance of our spiritual journey and the need to always seek truth, justice, and peace. In a world filled with uncertainty and challenges, faith, hope, and love remain powerful forces that can guide us to a future of light and harmony. The concept of Armageddon, rather than driving us to despair, can inspire us to live with purpose and to fight for the things that really matter. May we look to the future with hope, knowing that regardless of the difficulties we face, there is always a promise of renewal and transformation. Thank you for following this far. Don't forget to reflect on the profound significance of Armageddon in your life and in the world around you. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next content. May we all continue on our journey in search of truth, peace, and light.